What happened was.
Hey friends, it's so nice to see you. It's today, the time is now. You are here and the weather is outside your window.
Today's guest is an actor, singer, dancer, intimacy director, and diversity, equity, and inclusion leader. She is the founder of Stage a Change and is currently traveling the world on a fellowship researching diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Please welcome my friend, Cessalee Smith Stovall.
Hey, how's it going?
All right, how are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you. How are you?
Good. You're coming to us live from Central Park.
That's right. That's right. Sun is shining. There's humans outside. It's a good day.
Sky's blue. Well, here's a funny thing. I'm on the A train yesterday and someone yells my name and I look up and it's you.
And like literally minutes after I was Instagramming you, the irony.
And in my mind, you live in Australia. So looking up and finding you on the A train in New York City was astonishing.
Definitely was kind of I wasn't expecting to see anybody that I knew on the A train. And I look over and I see this tall, beautiful man. And actually what caught my eye was I saw just the little bit of your tattoo. And I was like, I know that tattoo. I know that face. I know that human.
Oh, well, I had the treat of spending basically the entire night with you because we were going to the same stop on the A train. And then we ended up hanging out and catching up because it's been many years since we've seen each other.
Yes.
And, the universe brought us together. And so I was so thrilled to learn more about the work you're doing right now, because of course you're on a fellowship traveling the world, learning more about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and holding interviews with leaders in this area all over the country.
Yes.
Yeah. And you also started a company called Stage a Change, which is doing similar work. So it was really fascinating to hear about your work. And I thought we have to bring you on the show immediately. So thank you for jumping in last minute and talking with me.
Absolutely. Thank you, A Train, for bringing us together.
Absolutely. You must take the A train.
That's what the song says, right?
Yeah, all the way to Sugar Hill in Harlem. So we did it.
Yeah. So
tell me about this
exciting.
work you're on. You're having these conversations, which are really important. I also have to say, like, diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's a very hot topic right now. It's so hot that we've already shortened it just to DEI, which a lot of people don't even know what that means, but they're like, oh, the DEI officer. And you're like, hold up, what's going on? Like, let's take a step back and give this the time and attention it deserves. That's kind of my impression.
Yeah.
And so talk to me about your work and your jumping off point in this. Of course, this is not your first time traveling the world. You toured with Book of Mormon, the Broadway smash hit, and you are an actor and a singer, and you've had a really beautiful career touring all over. And so now you're on a new chapter, a new adventure, a new tour. And what is your jumping off point for this? And what are you learning and what are you finding in your adventures?
Ooh, good questions. I moved to Australia in 2016 with Mormon, thinking I was going to be there for 14 months, and I've been there 6 years now. And really, kind of the push for me to go into the DEI world, or the Abide world, as I like to call it, but I'll get to that. Was recognizing that there was a lack of representation of artists of color in Australia, and part of the whole reason I was brought over was because the conversation was, well, we don't really have Black actors. We don't have actors of color here. We need to bring them over for America, but don't bring white actors over. We've got plenty of white actors here. And I didn't understand why there wasn't the same initiatives and support and training and access to the sector for people of color as there had been for white people, and why there was no plan to do anything about that. And so Stage a Change started in 2017 to really help create professional opportunities for artists of color specifically. And when I started it, I really thought it was just about diversity and representation, the D and the DEI. But what I've come to figure out is that there are a whole lot of things that need to happen before we can get to diversity. So I call them the ABIDE principles because I refer to access, belonging, inclusion, diversity, and equity. And I think the number one problem we have is access. People don't have access to the sector. They don't have access to training. They don't have access to mentors. They don't have access to paid opportunities to be a learner instead of having to come in and somehow be expected to be an expert when we finally decided we want to diversify. So I think it's about access first, figuring out how you can make people who you've given access to belong, how we can include them in the work, the decision-making practices, and then we can start to think about how we might increase diversity and making sure that there are equitable practices for all people. So the ABIDE principles have really kind of led me to where I am now, and that's trying to figure out how worldwide we engage with performers who are either ethnically, culturally, ability, neurodiverse. You know, there's so many versions of what diversity actually means and is, and how are we not only including them, but making sure that they have access and belong and, you know, are authentically a part of a process as opposed to just like a performative face on a stage.
Right.
And I'm also an intimacy director, so I'm talking about intimacy and identity and inclusion as well. So lots of questions. I don't think I answered all your questions, but
no, you did. Well, and it's such a good point that intimacy is a huge part of this, and those things really go hand in hand. So it's really interesting that you're coming in at both angles there.
Yeah, thanks. It's been really great, and there are some amazing humans who are doing a lot of this work. So I'm really lucky that I feel like I get 6 weeks to just be a learner.
Yeah. So tell me all the cities that you are going to on this tour.
Yep. So Chicago, St. Louis, New York, DC, London, LA, with one small stop in Indianapolis for the Indiana State Fair. I know that's a little embarrassing to admit, but you know, that was my happy place.
Wow. And you're connecting with leaders in the arts world in all these cities.
Yeah, I've been really lucky that people have responded to my emails. So I'm pretty grateful that I'm talking to everyone from the Broadway League to artistic directors, executive directors of some of the largest theaters in the company. I'm talking to some of the hardest working intimacy professionals around. I'm literally looking at one right now who has graciously given me 10 minutes in the middle of our session to jump on with you. It's just been really amazing. How much people are willing to have these conversations, which is a big change from, even 2017 when I was starting these conversations. No one wanted to talk about it. No one wanted to admit that there was an issue. And so I think it's really great that we're at least talking about how to solve it, even if we haven't figured that out yet.
Right. Do you see, because I know you're coming from Australia right now on this journey, but you are an American. And do you see a parallel between Australia and the United States as far as these issues? Do you see them at a global level? Like where do we stand in that sense?
Yeah, like I think the conversation is really highlighted here in America. I think Australia is a little bit further behind starting the conversation. But in Australia, the conversation around indigeneity and land, traditional land ownership and recognizing the sovereignty of First Nations people has been happening for a long time, even more so in New Zealand. And so there are certainly lessons that are happening overseas that I think are great things that America can take. And I think conversely, there are a lot of things that I'm learning and things that I'm seeing work in practice here that are kind of still at a theory place in Australia.
Right. Wow.
But the bagels in America are definitely better. We are far more advanced on bagel production here, definitely in New York.
Yeah, you're enjoying some bagels in your time here?
I've already had 2.
What flavors?
Well, it was supposed to be everything, but it ended up being sesame, but I didn't mind. And then a plain bagel.
Very nice.
Duh, obviously, with salmon.
Salmon. Oh, very good. Wow. My bagel order is like a toasted pumpernickel with cream cheese.
That's also very good. I might have to dip into the pumpernickel.
I'll just with that. Well, this is a big question, but what is your wave a magic wand 10 years from now? Where has this work taken you and what changes have been affected by this work?
Yeah, 10 years from now, I think the conversation is really embedded in every part of the process. So, in hiring, we're thinking about equity. In casting, we're thinking about it. In succession planning for leaders, we're thinking about it. In board placement, we're thinking about it. In audience engagement, we're thinking about it. Some people like to say in 10 years, I'd like to not be doing this job. I'd like for it to be working. I still think we need people to do this job because the conversation changes, and we need people who are really focused on making sure that we don't slip backwards. But I would love to see in 10 years that, access is not a problem, belonging is not a problem, inclusion is not a problem. We're really thinking about how can we continue to diversify and recognizing the uniqueness of humanity that exists and making sure that we're representing their stories and their identities and their perspectives, either in the stories that we tell or in the way that we talk to audiences, finding ways to make space for all of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, congratulations on this new venture and your company and on this fellowship. It's so exciting that you're doing this work and so impressive. And I can't wait to learn more about your work and to catch up with you again after your 6-week tour finishes so I can hear your thoughts looking back on it. I know we're just in St. Louis and we had the chance to talk about that yesterday, which is really interesting, especially in that you met with leadership at Opera Theater of St. Louis, where I've worked, and that was really interesting to hear about that experience.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how so many people are taking their own version to this work. Some people went out and hired someone right away. Some people, I use the analogy, some people like to clean their own house before they invite the guests in. Some people are working only with an external consultant. Everyone's kind of doing it the same way. And I think part of what's exciting about this research that I'm doing is that there is not necessarily one way to do it, but there are certainly some very clear benchmarks that lead to either the success or kind of the what's the word? Like either the work succeeds or it kind of just like dissolves away. And so you can kind of see where people are headed and, if they're headed to the benchmarks or not. So it'll be interesting to keep abreast of what's going on.
Right. Well, another thing we talked about was, an action that's basically lip service that shows that you're doing something that's performative or real change. And those are two very different things.
Yeah.
And even though they can overlap in a sense, but it's like.
Yeah. I mean, I think that sometimes the problem is that people don't actually know what it means to do lip service. Some people, really thought that by putting their Black squares up on Instagram, they were doing something. And in some ways, maybe they did bring visibility to people in their networks, but finding the difference between a consideration and an action, I think is what I'm really interested in.
I like that, a difference between consideration and major. Well, I know you're in the middle of meetings and I so appreciate your time today. There are 2 questions I ask all my guests. If you don't mind, I would like to ask you these 2 questions before we leave each other. All right. 1, you can go back in time to any moment in your life and tell your younger self one thing. What is it?
Well, we went to college together and we were on the same track of, auditioning and wanting so hard, so bad to be accepted by a program that wasn't ready for us. And I would go back after my 3rd failed audition and say, girl, you're going to be all right. It's okay. You didn't need it. You won't need it. It'll teach you resilience, but you're going to be all right. I wish I hadn't cried quite so many tears over what I felt like was the end of my career, because it actually was really the beginning.
Absolutely. Okay, the final question, it's a biggie. What is the meaning of life?
Oh, bagels, right? Everything bagels, I think.
Everything bagels. I like that. But what about when you order an everything and you get a sesame?
I mean, it just means that like life, I have to keep living. I have to keep living at least until I get an everything bagel. The real answer, I guess the fitting answer is something that someone named Pete Shepard told me before I took this trip. He said, you can plan, you can do all this stuff, but make sure that you leave space for serendipity. So I guess the meaning of life And in every way is so true, from our random meeting on the A train and all the things that led to it. The meaning of life is to leave some space for the serendipity.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Well, it's so wonderful to see you after so many years and so great to catch up. And I'm so impressed by the work you're doing. And thank you for coming on.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. It's good to see you.
That's all for today's episode. Puppies and rainbows till we meet again.